No one there was looking for justice. This needed to be clear from the start. That process was born from contempt accumulated at family dinners, grew in the humiliation of the backstages, and was taken to court as a meticulously rehearsed spectacle. The family wanted to win, but above all they felt a visceral need to expose, degrade, and silence someone they, in their arrogance, considered inferior. He was a distant relative. He was always treated as an annex, a footnote in the lineage. He never attended the same clubs, never wore the same designer brands, never spoke with that polished confidence of one born with a silver spoon. While the others grew up shielded by lawyers and influence, he grew up early, callousing his hands and learning to survive. In a silence they mistook for submission. His mistake was decency. Years before, when the family's main business plunged into a crisis that threatened the surname, he was the one who accepted the burden. He managed chaotic accounts, signed risky documents, and solved problems the heirs feared to touch. Everything was done directly, without sophisticated contracts or fine print, because to him, it was about blood and honor. But when the cash flow smiled again, he became a nuisance, a living reminder of a debt of gratitude they did not want to pay. They started with veiled comments in the hallways. Then came subtle accusations at Sunday meetings. Finally, the narrative was built with precision. He had taken advantage of the crisis. It did not matter if it was a lie. In their world, it only mattered if the lie looked like a convenient truth. The family decided to go to court not to seek the truth, but to publicly stamp their version. They were absolutely certain he would crumble under pressure, that he would bow his head before the weight of the court, that he would sign any humiliating agreement not to be destroyed by the headlines. And now, in that crowded courtroom, the stage was set. Lawyers in impeccable suits, witnesses trained to lie with conviction, looks loaded with cold contempt. On the other side of the room, there was only him, alone, without an entourage, without an army of defenders. They believed that would be the death blow, the day the poor relative would be officially stamped as the villain of the story. What no one there suspected was that the humiliation had been too planned to be perfect. And when the theater is exaggerated, reality usually charges a high price. What seemed like a routine judgment was about to turn into a storm that no one in that room could contain. The humiliation, in fact, did not begin before the judge. It started in the cold corridors of the courthouse. As he walked slowly, holding a cheap plastic folder, the clan arrived en masse. They laughed loudly, exchanging confidences as if they were at a victory cocktail party. Lawyers surrounded them with deference, firm handshakes, and smiles of complicity. He passed through the group as if he were invisible, a shadow crossing a garden of vanities. "It doesn't even seem like he understands what's happening here," someone commented in a tone loud enough to hurt. "He'll leave here with nothing, not even his pride will remain." Another responded, with almost childish pleasure. He heard every word. He felt the venom of every laugh. But he kept his eyes down, not out of shame or fear, but out of a deep weariness. The weariness of one who spent their life explaining their version to deaf ears. The weariness of being treated as a stranger just for not possessing the fake gloss of that world of appearances. Upon entering the courtroom, the theatrical piece gained momentum. They occupied the chairs with aggressive confidence, spreading leather folders, latest generation laptops, and letter-headed documents. He sat in the solitary chair, hands resting on his knees, body stiff like a rope about to break, breathing in a controlled rhythm. The magistrate had not yet entered, but the looks from the audience had already pronounced the sentence. One of the cousins whispered something and let out a muffled giggle. Another shook her head in disapproval, staring at him fixedly, trying to reduce him to nothing, and for a brief moment it worked. He felt small under the weight of that collective expectation. He felt the pressure of the narrative already written in everyone's minds, the exploitative relative who would finally be put in his proper place. When the judge entered and everyone stood up, the family's confidence was almost palpable. They didn't want an investigation. They wanted a public execution. The family lawyer opened the proceedings, His voice was trained, loaded with an eloquence that transformed suppositions into facts. Every sentence was a planned blow to hurt honor. Every word was a brick in the construction of a golden lie. While the attack lasted for hours, he remained a statue. He did not interrupt. He showed no reaction of hatred. He did not try to defend himself by shouting, and this made them laugh even more inside. For arrogant minds, silence is always interpreted as defeat. What they did not know was that the silence of that man was not empty. It was the silence of one who keeps the key to a cell they built themselves. When it was finally his turn to speak, the atmosphere changed. The prosecuting lawyer sat down with a mission-accomplished smile. There was that silence of satisfaction, the silence of one who waits for the condemned's final stumble. The judge adjusted his glasses, slowly noted something, and raised his eyes to the lonely man. "Does the defendant wish to speak?" Everyone leaned in. It was the moment of the fall. They expected him to stammer, to get lost in empty justifications, but he did not say a word immediately. He just took a deep breath, a sigh that seemed to carry years of injustice. The judge frowned, impatient. "You are being accused of bad faith," insisted the magistrate. "Your silence can be interpreted against you." He raised his face slowly. There was no despair in those irises. There was no dread. There was something much more dangerous for his tormentors. Absolute lucidity. "I understand, Your Honor," he said. The voice, though low, cut through the room with surprising sharpness. "I just need a moment. A moment." The family stirred on the wooden benches, uncomfortable with that unforeseen calm. Their lawyer smiled with disdain, like one conceding a last wish to a condemned man. He opened the plastic folder. Inside, there were no impressive volumes of paper. There were only a few loose sheets. He withdrew one of them with an almost solemn delicacy, as if handling an ancient secret. Throughout this entire process, he began without looking sideways. "They said I was silent because I had no arguments, that my muteness was the proof of my guilt." He paused briefly, letting the weight of the words settle. "But I remained silent because I needed to be sure that everyone here would feel comfortable enough to finally hear the truth." The atmosphere in the room instantly cooled. The judge straightened his posture. The family lawyer stopped playing with his gold pen. "The truth does not need shouts," he continued. "It only needs time." The whispers died. The woman who was laughing before now pursed her lips, her eyes fixed on the paper he held. He extended the document. "This is an official record, ignored by the prosecution for being inconvenient, but fully valid." As the court officer took the paper to the judge's desk, the room was invaded by a new sensation: doubt. And for those who built a lie on a foundation of false certainties, doubt is lethal. The judge read the first line, then the second. His eyes moved rapidly across the paper and he stopped. He raised his head and faced the family with an expression no one there expected to see. "This document completely alters the nature of this case." The silence that followed was no longer the family's victory. Silence. It was a dense, suffocating, and terrible silence. And for the first time, the one who seemed tiny in that room was not the man sitting alone. The magistrate did not resume speaking immediately. He reviewed the paragraphs, checking seals and signatures, like one discovering a fraud hidden in plain sight. The family lawyer, sensing disaster, tried to intervene. "Your Honor, any new document needs expertise. It is not in the main records." The judge raised his hand authoritatively. "It is in the public and official records, Doctor, and it was filed long before this action was even imagined." A murmur of shock ran through the benches. The family's confidence was cracking in real time. "You," said the judge, focusing on the defendant, "remained silent for weeks. Why?" He responded with a calm that chilled the relative's blood. "Because if I spoke sooner, they would create a new lie to cover this one. I needed them to present all their cards. I needed them to feel safe enough to show who they really are." He pointed to the paper on the judge's desk. That document proves that every decision I took was authorized. In writing, with notarized signatures, by themselves. The woman in the first row shook her head frantically. "That is impossible. It's a lie," she stammered. The judge silenced her with an icy look. "Madam, contain yourself." The prosecuting lawyer no longer had his previous smile. "Even if there is authorization, the moral damage remains." He tried, desperately. The judge closed the folder with a dry thud. "There is no moral damage when it is proven that there was a deliberate manipulation of the narrative." The word echoed, manipulation. The judge took a deep breath and looked at the man. "You were brought here as a defendant. You were publicly humiliated. You had your honor shattered by those you helped." He paused meaningfully. "But the facts indicate that someone needed a convenient culprit to cover their own tracks, and they chose you, judging that you would have no voice." The room plunged into a vacuum of sound. No one moved. Those who were laughing before now stared at the floor or their own hands. The process had not ended on paper, but the soul of that accusation was dead. The judge struck the gavel to suspend the session for 15 minutes, but the blow of the gavel sounded like a final sentence for the family. In the corridors, the scene was different. The laughter had evaporated. The groups broke apart. The relatives now avoided looking at each other as if proximity could contaminate them with guilt. Their lawyer spoke on the phone with feverish urgency. Arrogance replaced by the panic of damage control. The accused man remained in his place, sitting alone, exactly as he started. But the perception of those looking at him had changed. He was no longer the poor relative being judged. He was a man of a moral stature that no one there could reach. When the hearing was resumed, the judge was incisive. He called the company accountant, a man the family believed they had under control. But the accountant, seeing the revealed document, decided he would not go down with the ship. "I warned them," confessed the accountant, his voice trembling. "I warned them he was acting under their direct orders, but they told me that if something went wrong, he would be the perfect scapegoat because he had no influential surname to protect himself." The air became unbreathable for the accusers. The truth was not just appearing, it was running over every rehearsed lie. "This court," declared the judge, "is no longer judging an administrative error. It is judging a reputation destruction scheme." He looked at the woman who led the family. "You now claim not to remember the orders you gave?" "Curious, as your memory was impeccable." The humiliation had switched sides, and it was not subtle. It was public, recorded, and definitive. The defense lawyer, who until then had hardly spoken, stood up for final considerations. "Your Honor, my client does not seek revenge. He sought only the right to be who he is, without the labels they tried to stick on him. He won not because he fought with their weapons, but because he refused to give up the truth." The judge closed the case. "I determine the dismissal of the complaints against the defendant for absolute lack of foundation and for full proof of innocence. Furthermore, I will forward the case for investigation of procedural fraud and slander against the accusers." The gavel struck this time with the sound of freedom. The man stood up. There was no explosion of joy, no insults to the defeated. He just put his sheet of paper in the plastic folder and walked towards the exit. Passing by the family, who now seemed shriveled on the benches, he did not stop. He did not look back. He did not need an apology that would never be sincere. Outside, under the afternoon sun, he breathed the fresh air. Justice does not erase the scars of humiliation, but it takes away the power of those who cause them. He returned to his simple routine, to his honest work, and to his silence of peace. And the family? They were left with their names intact on documents, but stained in their souls. If this story touched you and showed that the truth always finds its way, don't forget to like this video. This helps our channel bring messages of justice and overcoming to more people. Share it with those who need to know that the silence of an honest person is stronger than the noise of 1,000 liars. And if you are not yet part of our community, subscribe and turn on the bell. Here, Stories come to life and lessons last forever. Thank you for accompanying us until the end. See you in the next video.